We live in a world where the noise never stops. Worries follow you everywhere. Anxiety sneaks into your routine, and stress seems inevitable. You automatically react to what happens around you, losing control over your emotions and decisions. But have you ever wondered what would happen if instead of reacting, you started mastering your mind? Most people seek external solutions to calm the internal chaos, but real changes begin within. The problem is not the world, but how you face it. The Stoics understood that the key to a stable life is not to avoid problems, but to strengthen the mind to face them with discipline and clarity. Today, you will learn how to transform anxiety into power. Develop a mindset that does not break in the face of adversity, and act with discipline, not fleeting motivation. You will discover that nothing can bring you down if you strengthen your inner self, and that destiny is not fought, but understood and used in your favor. This is not another empty motivational speech. It is a practical guide to regain control of your life, train your mind, and stop being a slave to emotions. If you want to leave frustration behind, make decisions without fear, and find peace in a noisy world, the time to act has come. Your transformation begins now. Number 1. Transform anxiety into power. The key to an unbreakable mind. Anxiety is an internal fire. It can consume and destroy, or it can fuel a resilient and focused mind. The difference between the two depends on how you face it. It's not anxiety itself that stops you, but the way you react to it. The Stoics understood that suffering does not come from external events, but from the interpretation we give them. The mind is the battlefield, and if you learn to channel anxiety instead of fearing it, you will discover a strength that previously seemed inaccessible. Most people try to avoid anxiety, repress it, or numb it with distractions. But what is ignored does not disappear. It only strengthens in the shadow. The only way to overcome fear is by going through it. Instead of asking yourself, "Why do I feel this way?" question, "What can I do with this?" Anxiety is not your enemy. It's a signal that there is something you need to face. Instead of seeing it as an obstacle, use it as a reminder that you have the ability to take action. The Stoics taught that control is not in what happens, but in how we respond. Anxiety becomes paralyzing when you identify with it, when you believe it defines who you are. But the reality is different. You are not your anxiety, you are the one who decides what to do with it. Marcus Aurelius said, "If something external disturbs you, the problem is not in the thing itself, but in your judgment about it, and you have the power to change that judgment." Every fear thought can be transformed into an opportunity to strengthen the mind. The secret is in changing the perspective. Anxiety is energy, a force that can be redirected. Instead of allowing it to consume you, turn it into action. If you feel anxiety before a significant challenge, it means you care. Use that feeling to prepare better, to focus, to sharpen your determination. Instead of seeing anxiety as a break, use it as fuel. Breathe deeply, feel the discomfort, and move forward anyway. Anxiety is not a sentence, it's a challenge. Every time you face fear, you strengthen. Every time you decide to act despite the discomfort, you prove to yourself that you are stronger than you thought. Don't fight against anxiety trying to eradicate it. Transform it into an engine that drives your growth. Mind control is not achieved by eliminating fear, but by learning to live with it without letting it dominate you. The power is in accepting that anxiety exists, but not giving it control over your decisions. When you learn to observe it without immediately reacting, it becomes a reminder of your ability to overcome any situation. You can't prevent anxiety from appearing, but you can decide what to do with it. If you face it with resistance, it will grow. If you take it as an opportunity for growth, it will become an ally. The key to an unbreakable mind is not the absence of anxiety, but the ability to transform it into strength. Don't let anxiety control your destiny. Use its energy to build a firm path and move forward without fear. Number 2. Stop reacting. Start mastering your mind. The problem is not what happens around you, but how you react to it. Most people live in automatic mode, letting themselves be dragged by circumstances without realizing that every impulsive reaction is a loss of control. How many times have you made decisions driven by anger, fear, or frustration, only to regret it later? Mastering the mind does not mean repressing emotions, but learning to observe them without being controlled by them. The Stoics understood that the key to serenity lies in the ability to respond with reason, not instinct. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you interpret it that affects you." A person who masters their mind is not one who never feels anger, but one who chooses what to do with it. True strength is not in the reaction, but in the pause you take before acting. Imagine being in the middle of a storm. Uncontrolled emotions are like gusts of wind that push you in all directions. If you cling to them, they will drag you mercilessly. But if you stand firm, if you become the anchor instead of the drifting ship, nothing can shake you. The external world is chaotic, but within you, there can be calm if you choose to cultivate it. The problem is that many people react without thinking. An offensive comment, a criticism, bad news, and they immediately lose control. They get angry, they complain, they act without considering the consequences. But impulsive reaction is an act of weakness. Whoever reacts without control is a slave to their emotions. Whoever learns to stop before responding becomes the master of their destiny. To stop reacting and start mastering your mind, you need to practice the pause. The next time you feel anger, stop. Observe the emotion without judging it. Ask yourself, what would I gain if I respond impulsively? Most of the time, the answer will be nothing. Calm is not submission, it is power. When you choose not to react, you give yourself the opportunity to act with intelligence instead of instinct. Marcus Aurelius was clear that the mind is the last fortress. No one can take away your control over how you think unless you allow it. Every day, life will put tests in front of you. People who will try to provoke you, situations that will awaken your impatience, circumstances that will challenge your stability. But there is the real test, not in what happens, but in how you decide to face it. If you want to master your mind, train your self-control like a muscle. When you feel the urge to react, breathe and wait. Do not allow a momentary emotion to destroy what you have built. Choose to act with reason, with clarity, with strategy. Not because you are indifferent, but because you understand that reactivity is a trap that takes you away from your purpose. Inner peace is not found in a world without problems, but in a mind that has learned to face them firmly. If you control your reactions, you control your destiny. Do not let external provocations dictate your mental state. True freedom begins when you decide to be the master of your mind, not a slave to your emotions. Number 3. How to find peace in a noisy world. We live in an era of constant noise, saturated information, incessant notifications, unfiltered opinions, and worries that relentlessly pile up. The modern world is a torrent of distractions that steals calmness and trains the mind to be in a permanent state of alert. But here's the truth. The external noise is not the problem, but the inability to find silence within oneself. Peace is not found by fleeing from chaos, but by learning to be immune to it. The Stoics understood that serenity did not depend on the environment, but on the way it was faced. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire in times of war and plagues, but his strength lay in his ability to keep his mind serene in the midst of the storm. He did not seek to eliminate chaos, but to face it with equanimity. And that is the key. Peace is not sought. It is built from within. The problem is that most people try to find calm in external things: travel, entertainment, relationships, or even isolation. But none of that eliminates the internal noise. If the mind is restless, no matter how quiet the environment is, the chaos will still be present. The only solution is to learn to tame the mind, to reduce mental clutter before trying to change what is outside. The first step is to choose what you pay attention to. If you consume information that only generates anxiety, you become a reflection of that chaos. Epictetus said, "It is not the things that disturb us, but the opinion we have about them." Applying this means that it is not the noise that steals your peace, but the power you give it over you. The question is, will you let the external dictate your internal state? Instead of fighting against the noise of the world, learn to coexist with it without allowing it to control your mind. If you expect everything around you to be perfect to find peace, you will be trapped in an illusion. The world will not stop being noisy. There will always be distractions, challenges, and crises. But if you develop the ability to filter out the irrelevant, you will find calm even in the midst of the hustle and bustle. The second step is to learn to create spaces of mental clarity. It's not about escaping from the world, but about reserving moments of introspection. The Stoics practiced the art of contemplation, the exercise of observing thoughts without reacting to them. You don't need a spiritual retreat to achieve this. You can find peace anywhere if you train your mind for it. When everything around you is a whirlwind of chaos, breathe. Don't react immediately. Don't let opinions, other people's problems, or external expectations invade your tranquility. A moment of pause can make the difference between acting wisely or being dragged along by confusion. True peace is not the absence of noise, but the ability to maintain calm within you, regardless of what happens outside. It is an internal state, a conscious decision not to allow the external world to dictate your well-being. The Stoics knew this. Whoever masters their mind finds serenity in any circumstance. Choose calmness, not because the world stops being noisy, but because you have decided not to be part of that noise. Number 4. Move forward with discipline, not motivation. Motivation is fragile. It arrives with force, but it disappears just as easily. One day you feel inspired and energetic to conquer the world, and the next, the excitement fades and everything seems like a heavy burden. That's how emotions work. They are volatile, unpredictable, and unreliable. If you rely on motivation to move forward, you'll be stuck in an endless cycle of ups and downs, where your progress will depend on whether you feel like it or not. But there's something more powerful, something the Stoics understood perfectly: discipline. Discipline doesn't need inspiration or momentary emotions. It's the conscious decision to do what needs to be done, regardless of mood, without depending on desire. It's getting up and fulfilling what is necessary, even on days when everything seems difficult. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest exponents of Stoicism, wrote, In the morning, when you rise unwillingly, bear this thought in mind: I am rising to do the work of a human being. He wasn't talking about waiting to feel motivated, but about remembering the responsibility to act without excuses. Here's the fundamental difference. Motivation is an emotion. Discipline is a habit. One fades, the other remains. When a person bases their actions on motivation, they constantly seek external stimuli to move: inspiring videos, motivational speeches, success quotes. But none of that replaces the ability to act when you don't feel like it, when everything inside you wants to give up, and yet you keep going. The key to a strong and structured life is not doing the right thing when you feel inspired, but doing it even when you lack energy. Discipline is a muscle, and like any muscle, it strengthens with constant repetition. The more times you act without depending on enthusiasm, the easier it will be to do it automatically. It becomes a part of you. Imagine two people who want to improve their physique. One relies on motivation. The first few days they train enthusiastically, but as soon as the excitement fades, they stop. The other person, on the other hand, commits to discipline. They train whether they feel like it or not, with or without inspiration. In the end, who will achieve results? Discipline always wins. To develop a Stoic mindset, you must understand that life doesn't wait for you to feel ready. If you only act when you feel motivated, you'll be a slave to your emotions. But if you develop self-discipline, you'll take control of your destiny. Be the master of your actions. Don't depend on momentary impulse. Don't wait to feel like moving forward. Act. Motivation is a luxury. Discipline is a necessity. Do what you must do, not because you feel inspired, but because you've decided to do it. When you understand this, you'll stop waiting for ideal moments to start. There will be no excuses, no procrastinations, only constant action. And that's the difference between those who dream and those who achieve. Number 5. Nothing can bring you down if you strengthen yourself. Most people fear failure, rejection, uncertainty. They feel vulnerable to life because they have built their strength on the external, on the approval of others, on favorable circumstances, on the stability they believe they have secured. But all of that is fragile. At some point, life will shake your foundations and test your resilience. If your strength depends on external factors, when these disappear, you will crumble. But if you build an unbreakable mindset, nothing can make you fall. The Stoics understood that true power does not lie in what you have, but in who you are when you lose everything. Epictetus, who was born a slave and became one of the great philosophers of history, said, "Do not seek for events to happen as you wish. Wish for them to happen as they happen, and you will live in peace." His strength did not come from luck, but from his ability to accept reality and adapt to it without complaining. The problem is that many people believe that strength comes from outside. They cling to relationships, jobs, possessions, as if that gave them security. But true security is not having something, but knowing that, whatever happens, you will still stand. How is this achieved? By training the mind to resist, to accept, to move forward without depending on ideal conditions. You cannot control everything that happens, but you can control how you respond to it. Adversity only destroys those who have not learned to see it as a challenge. If you take each blow of life as an opportunity for growth, then each obstacle will make you stronger instead of weakening you. The secret is to stop running from pain and learn to transform it into resilience. Imagine a tree in the middle of a storm. The wind hits it hard, The rain tries to tear it apart, but its roots are deep. No matter how strong the storm, it stands. That's how your mindset should be, unbreakable in the face of life. It doesn't mean you don't feel pain or fear, but none of that will have the power to stop you. Strength is not built in easy moments, but in challenges. Those who seek comfort all the time weaken without realizing it. But those who face difficulties with determination strengthen with each obstacle. The question is not if life will test you, but if you will be ready when it does. Don't look for the world to be easier. Make yourself stronger. Don't wait for problems to disappear. Develop the ability to face them. Life hits everyone, but only those who have not worked on their inner strength crumble. Resilience is not something you are born with. It is something you build, and it is built every time you decide not to give up. Every time you keep going when everything seems against you. Nothing can bring you down if you have learned to resist. Number 6. Fate is not fought. It is understood and used to your advantage. Most people are at war with reality. They fight against what they cannot change, resist the inevitable, and get frustrated when things do not go as expected. But this resistance only generates suffering. Life goes on, regardless of how much you oppose it. And here lies the difference between those who wear themselves out uselessly and those who move forward intelligently. The former fights against the unalterable, the latter understands it and uses it to their advantage. Accepting fate does not mean giving up or settling, but understanding that there are forces beyond your control that will continue their course. You can make plans, devise strategies, but the world will not revolve around your desires. Instead of wasting energy fighting the unchangeable, learn to adapt and transform each circumstance into an opportunity. Rigidity breaks you. Flexibility allows you to survive. Imagine you lose your job overnight. You can sink into despair, lament the injustice, and resist the new reality. Or you can accept the situation and look for alternatives. Life does not stop for what you lost, but it does give you the opportunity to rebuild something new. Acceptance is not resignation. It is applied intelligence. Many people cling to an ideal of how things should be, and when reality does not fit their expectations, they suffer. They get angry about the past, about others' decisions, about events they cannot control. But the time they invest in complaints is time they could use to move forward. Accepting fate is to stop lamenting what cannot be changed and focus on what is still possible. Obstacles will always be there. The difference lies in the attitude with which you face them. If you see problems as tragedies, they will paralyze you. If you see them as challenges, they will strengthen you. Everything depends on perspective. The same event can be the end or the beginning of something, depending on how you interpret it. Think of a river that encounters a rock in its path. It does not try to move it. It does not stop to complain. It simply flows around it and moves on. This should be your mindset. Adaptable, resilient, unbreakable. Rigidity breaks you. Unnecessary resistance wears you out. But adaptability keeps you moving. You cannot change the circumstances, but you can change how you respond to them. Accepting fate does not mean being passive. It means observing what happens, understanding its impact, and making decisions with clarity. If you cling to what was not, you lose the opportunity to create something better. Life will not ask if you agree with what happens. It will simply move on. The question is, will you continue to fight against the inevitable, or will you learn to move with it? Those who understand fate stop seeing it as a condemnation and start using it as a tool for growth. Every experience, even the most painful ones, can be the basis for something bigger. If you resist, you will suffer senselessly. If you accept it intelligently, you will find ways to take advantage of it. Do not let rigidity prevent you from moving forward. Adapt, flow with changes, and find a way to use each situation to your benefit. Because fate is not fought, it is understood, molded, and turned into an ally. Number 7. Live without fear of chaos. How to think like a Stoic. Chaos is an inevitable part of life. No matter how organized you are, how many plans you have, or how much you try to control your environment, there will always be unforeseen events, challenges, and moments of uncertainty. Most people fear chaos because they associate it with a loss of control. But the real problem is not chaos itself, but the way you interpret it. You can't eliminate disorder from the world, but you can learn to face it with a strong mindset without letting it consume you. Thinking like a Stoic means understanding that chaos is not your enemy, but a constant of reality. You can't prevent problems from occurring, but you can decide how to react to them. Instead of seeing disorder as a threat, accept it as part of existence. Resistance to change only generates unnecessary suffering. Rigidity breaks you. Flexibility allows you to move forward. When you live in fear of chaos, you become a fragile person. You seek security in everything. You get upset easily, and you freeze when things don't go as you expect. But absolute security is an illusion. No plan is foolproof. No routine is unbreakable. The world will continue to move in unpredictable ways, and your only realistic option is to adapt without losing balance. The Stoics had a fundamental principle. Internal control is the only thing you really possess. You can't decide what will happen tomorrow, but you can control how you face each situation. You can't prevent someone from criticizing you, but you can choose whether to take those words as an attack or as a learning opportunity. The difference between someone who sinks in chaos and someone who masters it lies in the way they perceive it. Fear of chaos comes from the desire for everything to be stable, from the belief that things must be kept under control. But if you accept that life is uncertain, you stop suffering for what was never in your hands. Fear weakens when you understand that you don't need to control the world. You just need to control yourself. Think of the ocean. The waves are unpredictable. They can be gentle or violent, but a good sailor doesn't try to stop them. Instead, he learns to move with them, to read their rhythm, to use their strength to his advantage. This is the Stoic mindset. It doesn't try to change the nature of the world, but to understand it and adapt to it intelligently. Every time you face chaos with serenity, you strengthen yourself. Every time you choose calm in the midst of disorder, you demonstrate that you are not a slave to circumstances. It's not about ignoring problems, but facing them with clarity and determination. Thinking like a Stoic is remembering that life is not designed to please you. There will be difficulties, injustices, and moments of confusion. But instead of wasting energy complaining, use it to build a strong mind. Adversity doesn't disappear, but it loses power over you when you decide to face it without fear. If you get used to seeing chaos as a teacher instead of an enemy, each obstacle will become an opportunity to grow. Don't let uncertainty paralyze you. Move with it, learn from it, and use it to become stronger. Because life is not about avoiding chaos, but about learning to move in it with intelligence, patience, and control. Number 8. Control what you can. Let go of what you can't. Much of human suffering comes from trying to control the uncontrollable. People obsess over changing others' behavior altering circumstances beyond their reach, resisting realities that are already a fact. And in that process, they get frustrated, wear themselves out, and waste energy on futile struggles. But here's the truth. There are things that depend on you and things that don't. The difference between calm and mental chaos lies in recognizing which is which. The problem is that most people live as if everything were under their control. They get angry when someone acts unexpectedly. They feel victims of luck. They believe they can force others to change. But that's a lost battle. Trying to dominate what doesn't belong to you is a sentence to frustration. On the other hand, whoever learns to focus only on what they can handle finds freedom, peace, and clarity. Think of an archer. His responsibility is to tense the string, aim accurately, and release the arrow. But once the arrow has been shot, he no longer has control over the wind, the distance, or any unforeseen event. He can only control his preparation, his technique, and his execution. The same happens with life. You can prepare, act with intention, give your best, but once something leaves your hands, worrying is useless. The key is to develop the wisdom to differentiate what depends on you from what doesn't. You can control your thoughts, your actions, your decisions, and the way you interpret events. But you can't control what others think of you, the behavior of other people, or external circumstances. If you focus on the former, you gain power. If you obsess over the latter, you waste energy in vain. When you learn to let go of what you can't control, life becomes lighter. It doesn't mean you're indifferent, but that you understand there's a difference between doing your best and clinging to the impossible. You can do your part, but you can't force the results. You can give your opinion, but you can't control how it will be received. You can love someone, but you can't force them to reciprocate. Every time you get frustrated about something, ask yourself this question: is this under my control or not? If it is, do what's necessary to improve it. If it's not, let it go. Fighting against the inevitable is like trying to stop the rain with your hands, useless and exhausting. True peace doesn't come from avoiding problems, but from learning to respond only to what is really in your hands. Imagine how much freer you would be if you stopped worrying about what you can't change. Imagine the tranquility of accepting what doesn't depend on you, instead of suffering for it. You can't control everything that happens in life, but you can control how you face it. You can't change people, but you can decide who you surround yourself with. You can't prevent obstacles from appearing in your path, but you can choose how to overcome them. When you learn this lesson, you stop feeling like a victim and become someone strong. The key is not to try to control everything, but to learn to let go of what doesn't concern you and act with determination on what does. Because real power is not in manipulating the world in your favor, but in mastering your mind to respond with clarity and firmness to any circumstance.
Thank you for staying until the end of the video. If you watched the whole thing, comment "I am Stoic" as our secret signal to know that you're a true student of Stoicism. Don't forget to subscribe and give the video a like if you enjoyed it. See you in the next video, and remember, keep cultivating your Stoic mind.